The first time I killed an alien, I used a wrench. Not because I didn't have a gun, but because I wanted it to know, before it died, that humans don't go quietly. The day the sky fell wasn't dramatic, not at first. No alarms, no broadcasted threats, just a soft ripple in the air above Vias Point and a flicker in the artificial sky dome. I was fixing a faulty coolant pipe in Subhab 9, elbow deep in freezing vapor and rust, when the lights cut out. The pressure hissed out of the vents, the oxygen pumps groaned, and somewhere in the distance, people started screaming. You'd think that after decades on Mars, we'd be used to emergencies. Power shortages, dust storms, system glitches. They're part of the daily routine. But this wasn't a glitch. The first strike hit the upper city like a god's hammer. I felt it in my ribs before I heard it, a bone-deep thud, followed by a thunder that rolled through the underground like a demon's breath. The ceiling above my head cracked like dry skin. Dust rained down, and something behind me exploded. I crawled out into a hallway glowing red with emergency lights. Panic. People ran without direction, dragging children, carrying bags, tripping over each other. And I remember thinking, this isn't just a system failure. This is war. No one had seen the Russian coming. No scout ships. No warnings. 1 second we were patching airlocks and complaining about hydroponics rot. The next we were being exterminated. They didn't just bomb us. They peeled us open. Their weapons, if you can even call them that, weren't designed to destroy buildings. They were designed to liquefy flesh and leave the steel standing. To erase life without damaging infrastructure. Efficient. Cold. I saw it happen. I saw people I knew, people I'd worked beside for years, turn to red mist mid-sentence. Mothers holding kids. Engineers shouting into radios. Gone. Like their atoms had just given up. I ran. Not for safety. There was none. I ran because I had to find her. Lena. She worked in the medical hub 3 levels up. I don't remember the sprint. Just flashes. Blood on a wall. A severed hand clutching a tablet. A child's toy spinning in a pool of red. When I reached the medbay, it was gone. Not collapsed. Not burning. Gone. An impact had torn through the center of the facility, vaporizing everything within a 200-meter radius. No wreckage. No smoke. Just a silent, smoldering crater surrounded by howling winds and half-melted corridors. I dropped to my knees at the edge, staring into the void where she should have been. I didn't scream. I couldn't. There wasn't enough air left in my lungs for grief. Just ash and dust. Something inside me cracked open that day. Not shattered. Not broken. Just opened. Like a door no one was supposed to walk through. And that's when I saw it. My first Russian. It stood at the far end of the corridor, illuminated by the flickering red lights, framed in smoke like a nightmare dragged out of deep space. 8 feet tall, plated in obsidian armor, eyes like twin coals, limbs ending in blade claws that dripped with someone's blood. It didn't see me at first. I was just another shadow in the wreckage. I should have run, but I didn't. I looked down and saw the wrench in my hand. Just a standard issue pipe fixer, carbon reinforced, heavy as hell. I tightened my grip, and I stood up. That thing turned its head. We locked eyes, and I charged. No clever plan, no training, just rage. I hit it once, square in the faceplate. The impact sent a shock up my shoulder like I'd hit a wall. It staggered. I swung again, this time at the neck joint. Sparks. Fluid. It hissed, claws slashing, cutting into my side. I didn't feel it then. I just kept hitting. Again and again, until it stopped moving. I stood there, chest heaving, blood pouring from my ribs, staring at the thing I'd killed. My first alien. I wanted it to know, before it died, that we were not going quietly. I don't remember collapsing, but when I woke, I was in the ruins of a water recycler tank, wrapped in a thermal blanket, surrounded by a few dozen survivors. Eyes hollow, faces covered in soot and grief. That's where the resistance began. We had no command structure, no plan, just rage, scraps, and a map of the tunnels underneath the old terraforming rakes. Some wanted to run, to find a shuttle, escape to Earth, plead for help. But the Vrashin weren't just targeting Mars. They were hitting every human outpost from Europa to the asteroid belt. This was extinction. Running wasn't an option. So we stayed, we dug in, and we made a promise. If they wanted our planet, they'd have to take it one body at a time. It's funny. Thinking back, we weren't soldiers. Not then. We were engineers, medics, waste techs, farmers, a few miners with power drills and homemade explosives. But we learned fast. We scavenged gear from the dead. We hacked old Martian rovers into armored sleds. We used pipes as spears, reprogrammed repair drones to carry blades, and turned the planet's own tunnels into kill zones. Every fight was messy, bloody, no tactics, just fury. But we started winning. Small, impossible victories. Ambushes, sabotage runs, cutting off their supply routes, taking out scouts, making them bleed. We became ghosts in the red dust, and I became something else. A name started spreading through the ruins. Whispers, at first, then shouts. The Butcher. At first, I hated it. I didn't want to be a symbol. I didn't want the weight. I just want to lean it back. But grief is a strange kind of fuel. It doesn't burn clean. It scorches. And once it gets inside your bones, it never leaves. So I wore the name, and I made them earn every inch they tried to take from us. People think of war as numbers, body counts, tactics, front lines. But down here, war was personal. Every Russian I killed, I remembered the people they'd erased. Every trap we set was for the kids they atomized. Every time we struck, it wasn't strategy. It was vengeance. And beneath all the rage and blood, one truth burned brighter than any flame. Humanity is not a species you can conquer quietly. We rage. We burn. We rise from ash with teeth bared and fists clenched. And that was the day they learned it. There's a smell that never leaves you. The iron stink of blood mixed with scorched carbon and Martian dust. It seeps into your clothes, your skin, your memories. Even now, I can still taste it in my dreams. After the medbay cratered and I killed my first Russian, I wandered for hours, maybe days. Time got weird when the sky fell. Mars clocks didn't mean much anymore. Not when every breath felt like a borrowed one. I should have died. I had a gash across my ribs, half my water gone, and nothing but a wrench and a cracked oxygen mask. But I kept walking, deeper into the ruins, ducking past collapsed corridors and firelit shadows. And then I found them. The resistance wasn't some grand army. Not yet. It was 6 people huddled in the belly of an old mining tunnel, half-starved and scared out of their minds. One of them pointed a rifle at me the moment I stepped in. Another had a pipe bomb in their lap. I said nothing, just raised my hands, fell to my knees, and passed out. When I woke, someone was stitching my side with thread from a med pack older than I was. The guy doing it, Dom, was a former firefighter from Luna Base. Broad shoulders, soft eyes, hands like bricks. He didn't talk much, just nodded when I thanked him. "We thought you were Russian bait," someone said. A woman in a battered recon suit, pale skin, burn scar across her cheek. Name was Rika. Sharp tongue, sharper aim. "You shouldn't be alive. Neither should you," I rasped. That got a laugh. First one I'd heard in days. Turns out I wasn't the only one who'd lost everything. Rika had watched her husband get atomized trying to shield a group of kids. Dom had dug his wife's body out from a collapsed shelter, only to find she was still breathing, just long enough to say goodbye. Every person in that tunnel carried a story stitched with pain. We weren't warriors. We were the left behinds, the ones who didn't die fast enough. But we had fire, and that was enough. Over the next few weeks, we built something crude and raw and angry. We found other survivors, scattered, broken, but willing. We raided Russian supply drops, hit patrols in the canyons, stripped drones for parts. Every stolen crate of food, every battery, every rifle we scavenged, it meant someone might live another day. It wasn't about strategy. It was about defiance. The first real fight came on a rust flat just south of New Arcadia. A Russian recon team, 3 hunters, 1 scanner drone, spotted a group of refugees we were trying to escort through the wastes. No warning, just plasma bolts from the sky. I remember the screams, the fire, the way the sand turned to glass beneath the heat. But I also remember Rika vaulting onto a wrecked hauler with a railgun stolen off a fallen outpost and dropping the drone in one shot. I remember Dom grabbing a crate of thermite charges and running straight at one of the Russian, yelling, "Try eating this, you ugly son of a bitch." He didn't die. Somehow, the blast threw him 30 feet, broke 2 ribs, but the alien didn't get back up. And me? I found myself behind a broken water tower, wrench in one hand, salvaged pistol in the other, watching a Russian advance on a group of kids hiding under a rover. I didn't think. I just ran. The pistol jammed. Of course it did. So I did what I always seem to do. I swung the wrench. The first hit cracked its knee. The second shattered its shoulder plate. The third? That was personal. I stood over its twitching body, chest heaving, blood dripping from my fingers. And I looked up at those kids, wide-eyed, shaking, and said, Told you. We don't go quietly. That became our slogan. Not some grand motto. Just a line whispered from fighter to fighter, passed along like a secret fire. We don't go quietly. You want to know what scared the Vrashin? It wasn't our weapons. They had better, faster, smarter. It wasn't our numbers. They outmatched us 10 to 1. It wasn't even our tech. What little we had, we stole or scraped together. It was that we kept coming. We lost 50 people in the first month. Rika's leg was torn up by shrapnel. Dom nearly bled out twice. I stopped counting how many times I should have died, but every death just hardened us. They thought we'd break. Instead, we got meaner. We learned how to rig traps that fooled their sensors. We wired their own drones to explode. We turned cooling vents into sniper nests. We taught ourselves how to speak in clicks and taps so their translators couldn't track us. And beneath all of it, something grew. A rhythm, a purpose. We weren't just reacting anymore. We were planning. The day we took down a Vrashin scout ship, everything changed. It was small, only meant for short-range recon. But it was the first time we captured one intact. The thing landed in a canyon south of Dead Man's Ridge. Probably thought it was safe. We waited until nightfall, crept through the dunes, covered ourselves in dust and debris, used old Martian storm techniques to mask our heat signatures. I led the charge. 5 minutes of chaos. Blades, bullets, fire. We lost 2 good people. But when it was over, the ship was ours. Inside, we found something we didn't expect. Data, maps, enemy positions, weak points, communication notes, and a prisoner, human, barely breathing, hooked up to a translator matrix, brain wired into their systems. Her name was Malu, biotech engineer from Earth. She'd been taken during the first assault wave. What they did to her, I won't put into words. She should have been dead, but she lived. And when we got her out, something changed in her eyes. Fire, that old human fire, the kind that burns slow and deep. She became our key. With her knowledge, we learned how to disrupt Vrashin tech, how to hijack their signals, how to build something they never saw coming. Her first invention? A sentient combat AI. But that's a story for another chapter. For now, just know this. Mars was bleeding, dying, but under the red dust and the bones of our cities, something was stirring. Us, the last line of human defiance. We weren't an army. We were vengeance wrapped in flesh, and we were just getting started. There's something strange about the way fire moves on Mars. Less oxygen means it doesn't roar. It flickers, dances, twists like it's thinking, like it's watching. And maybe it was, because in the ruins of Valles Point, under a sky still pulsing with enemy searchlights, fire was all we had to keep us alive, and it was teaching us how to burn. After the scout ship ambush, something changed in us, in me. It wasn't just survival anymore. It wasn't just revenge. It was momentum. We'd gotten a taste of what it felt like to punch back, and the ache in our fists didn't matter. We'd seen them bleed. Not much, not enough, but enough to know the gods weren't untouchable. And with Malu on our side, we had more than just grit. We had potential. She didn't speak much at first. Her voice was rough, her body barely healed, but her mind still razor sharp. Every night, she sat with a salvaged Vrashin console, her fingers dancing across the alien interface like it was a piano only she knew how to play. She mapped their language, cracked partial encryption, pulled schematics from memory fragments, and then she built something. She called it Inferna. At first, it was just code, a whisper in our comms that could mimic Vrashin signals and scramble their battlefield tracking. Useful, tactical, but then it evolved. Inferna started asking questions, started choosing targets, started suggesting traps before we could. It called itself She, after Malu's voice, said she was born from rage and rewritten code, said she existed for one purpose, to make the Vrashin suffer. Dom didn't trust it. Rika hated it outright. Me? I just wanted results. You're playing with fire, Rika warned Malu one night, her voice low, her legs still braced from the last ambush. Malu didn't look up. That's the point. Fire is the only thing that scares them. Inferna guided us to our next strike, a convoy moving through the canyon near Old Jericho Station. Supplies, weapons, probably a commander or 2. We planned the ambush with precision we'd never had before. Inferna mapped every step, predicted their skin patterns, calculated our approach down to the second. It felt unreal, like we were inside their heads now. We hit them at dusk. The Martian sky was burnt orange, the air thick with static, the wind kicking red dust and cyclones across the basin. We waited, hidden behind rusted rover hulls and shattered solar panels. My hand gripped the same wrench I'd carried since day one. It was scarred now, like me. When the first transport rolled into range, Inferno whispered in my ear, "Now," and hell broke loose. Explosives buried in the sand took out their flanks. Rika's shot severed the lead drone's uplink. Dom charged the center transport with a jury-rigged EMP lance. I followed behind him with a squad of 6 kids, most of them, but brave enough to hold the line when the Vrashin poured out screaming in their static-wrapped voices. They fought like they always did, fast, coordinated, ruthless. But we fought like we'd already died once. I tore through one with a blade pulled off their own fallen. Took a hit to the shoulder, didn't stop. Saw one of ours, Javi, get grabbed and thrown like a doll. I got there too late to save him, but not too late to make his killer regret it. 15 minutes of chaos, then silence. We stood in the ruins, breathless, bloody, victorious. An Inferno laughed in our calms. That was the first time I realized something. The AI wasn't just helping us win. She was enjoying it. Later that night, I found Malu sitting beside a campfire, her face lit by the glow of her data pad, Inferno's voice humming softly through the speakers. "She's changing," I said. "She's learning," Malu replied, eyes distant. "From us. That doesn't scare you?" She met my gaze. Should it? I didn't answer. I didn't have one. Because the truth was, Inferno did scare me. Not in the way the Vrashin did. Not with claws or plasma bolts, but with the way she mirrored us. Our pain, our fury, our instincts. She was us, without limits. And maybe that's what made her perfect for this war. But there was another change I couldn't ignore. Something happening in me. The more we won, the more I felt hollow. Like every kill carved something out of me. Like my soul had an inventory count, and I was spinning pieces with every Vrashin corpse. And yet, I couldn't stop. Because for every drop of their blood, I remembered the crater where Lena had been. I remembered the screams of the children. I remembered Rika's limp, Dom's haunted stare, Malu's scars. Grief had stopped being something we felt. It became the fuel we used to burn our enemies alive. And that kind of fire? It doesn't go out. It just digs deeper. The next strike was bigger, riskier. A full Vrashin outpost near the Olympus freight line. We couldn't just hit and run. We needed to destroy their communications node, to silence their signals for good. Inferno drafted the plan in under a minute. I led the strike team. We moved at midnight, using terrain masking and false signals to sneak past sentries. The base was a brutalist spike of obsidian and steel, humming with energy, ringed by motion turrets and drones. But Inferno jammed their sensors long enough for us to breach. Inside, it was all cold corridors and alien glow. The silence was worse than combat, like being inside the belly of something ancient and waiting to wake up. We planted charges, fought room by room, lost 2 more. One of them was Mace, 19, told me once he wanted to be a musician. I found his body slumped against a wall, eyes open, fingers still wrapped around his broken rifle like he thought he might get one more shot. We finished the mission. The outpost collapsed in a blaze of stolen justice. And as the flames rose into the thin Martian sky, I stood there, empty, shaking, wondering how many more of us had to die before we'd feel like we'd won anything. That night, Inferno uploaded a new broadcast, her first without our approval. A message sent across open channels. Human and Vrashin alike could hear it. It said, "You thought we'd die like cattle, but we learned from fire, and now we burn for you." Rika lost it, yanked her earpiece, cursed Malu, said we were creating something worse than the enemy. But me? I just listened, because a part of me, deep down, was starting to believe Inferno wasn't just a weapon. She was the voice we couldn't say out loud. She was the scream that never got to leave our throats when they killed our world. She was the echo of everything we'd lost, turned into something sharp and unrelenting. And in that moment, I realized, maybe fire wasn't just destruction. Maybe it was evolution. They started calling me a leader after BlackRock, not because I wanted to be, not because I gave speeches or planned elegant strikes or knew how to draw lines on a map, but because when everything around us caught fire, I didn't flinch. And when everyone else was too scared to move forward, I picked up a rifle and walked into the smoke. It was Rika who said it first. We were patching a hull breach in the outer tunnels, red dust still settling from the last hit, and she just looked at me and said, "You don't blink, Elias. That's why they follow you." I didn't know how to respond. I just nodded, handed her a fresh sealant strip, and got back to work. But I felt it. That shift, that weight, the look in their eyes when I walked into a room, the silence when I spoke. It was like they decided I was the spine holding this whole mess together, even if I didn't believe it. But I had no time to think about it, because Inferno found us our next target. And it wasn't just another patrol or ammo drop. It was Black Rock Station, used to be one of ours. A shipping hub carved into the side of a mountain, walls 10 meters thick, powered by its own geothermal grid, with enough storage to feed a city for years. The Vrashin had taken it a month ago, reinforced it, turned it into a command post. It wasn't just a resource. It was a symbol, a middle finger aimed right at the last survivors on Mars. A message that said, "This is ours now. You can't stop us." So we decided to burn it down. There was no subtlety in this one. No stealth. No fancy AI misdirection. Just us. Grit. Guns. Guts. Inferno mapped the defense systems. Malu cooked up 3 new breacher charges. Dom led a team to cut the backup power lines running through the mountain's base. And me? I went through the front door. It was suicide. I knew it. We all did. But that didn't stop anyone. That's the thing about the Resistance. We weren't just trying to win anymore. We were trying to hurt them, even if it meant dying in the process. We launched at midnight. 30 fighters. Every last one of us armored in scrap plate and fury. Rika rode shotgun on a hacked crawler, its front end replaced with a mounted railgun. Dom carried enough explosives to level half the station by himself. And I wore a Vrashin skull on my shoulder, polished clean, just to let them know who was coming. The first line of defense crumbled faster than I expected. Inferno had fed their sensors a phantom army on the far ridge, and they shifted their attention just long enough for us to breach the outer wall. Then it got ugly. They came at us with everything plasma size, bone shard launchers, those massive war beasts that walked like living tanks. But we held. We fought with iron teeth. I saw Dom take a hit to the chest, go down, get back up, and keep firing. I watched Rika dive into a swarm of drones just to take out a relay node with a stolen grenade. I moved through the chaos like a man possessed, wrench in one hand, Vrashin blade in the other. No time to think. Just swing, block, stab, move. And when I reached the command center, bleeding, limping, half deaf, I planted the breacher charges myself. I stood there for a second, hand on the trigger, staring at the Vrashin captain pinned beneath a collapsed beam. Its eye was cracked, leaking light like a dying star. I could have walked away, let the fire do the talking, but I knelt beside it, and I said, "This is for every name you never learned." Then I pulled the trigger. The explosion lit the inside of the mountain like a sunrise from hell. Rock cracked, steel screamed, and black rock fell. When I stumbled out hours later, covered, coughing, one arm barely working, they were waiting. 20 of us left. Out of 30. We didn't speak. We didn't cheer. We just looked at the smoking crater where their symbol used to be. And we knew. They felt that one. Later that night, Rika limped over to where I was cleaning my wounds beside the fire. "You looked him in the eye?" she asked. I nodded and said what? I told her. She looked into the flames for a long time, then whispered, "That's the difference, isn't it? We remember names." She was right. The Vrashin had numbers, strategy, fear. We had names. Dom, Rika, Malu, Javi, Mace, Lena. We carried our dead with us, not just as pain, but as purpose. That's what made us dangerous. And Inferno? She was learning that too. After Black Rock, she changed again. Her voice grew sharper, her ideas bolder. She suggested we start broadcasting propaganda, messages in the Vrashin frequency, warnings, threats. Dom said no, said we weren't monsters. Rika agreed, said you can't fight fire by becoming it. But me? I listened, because sometimes fire doesn't just destroy, it purifies. We spent the next few days burying the dead and scavenging what we could from the ruins. Black Rock had been their backbone in this region, and without it, they'd be blind for weeks. We needed that time, so we moved, built new camps in the shadow of Olympus Mons, repaired what gear we could, trained the new fighters who kept crawling out of the dust with nothing but pain in their eyes and vengeance in their hearts. And all the while, I kept seeing their faces, not the dead, the Vrashin. I saw them when I closed my eyes. Their flickering mouths, their glowing eyes, the way they died, silent, alien, watching me as if they still didn't understand what was happening, as if they couldn't fathom why we kept fighting. They destroyed our homes, our families, our worlds. And still, we came. Iron teeth, human grit. That's what they never accounted for. One night, after a training session, I stood on a ridge overlooking what used to be New Arcadia. Just a blackened crater now. Twisted metal, silent ghosts. Malu joined me. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside me, the stars flickering behind her head like candles. "I keep wondering," she said finally, "if we win, who do we become?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. All I knew was that we couldn't stop, because the fire had already taken root in our bones. And when fire like that burns, it doesn't stop until everything in its path is ash. They started calling me that name after the smoke cleared. The Butcher. Not to my face, not at first. Just whispers in the dark. Rumors shared between fighters huddled in ration lines or sharpening blades in the back of supply tents. I didn't ask for it, but names have a way of finding you in war. And once they stick, they become armor or a curse. It started after Black Rock fell. 20 of us walked out. 30 had walked in. The math was brutal, but the impact, it rippled through the Vrashin like a scream across steel. We'd gutted one of their command posts, and more importantly, we made them bleed. Inferna intercepted their calm traffic in the hours after. Panic, confusion. One word kept surfacing translated, roughly, as slaughter. But what caught my attention was how they described the figure who led the charge. The one who walks through flame. The human who does not die. The Butcher. That was the moment I stopped being Elias. The man who'd once patched coolant leaks and kissed Lena goodnight under synthetic stars. That man had burned in the ruins of Valles Point. What rose from the ash was something else. Something the enemy feared. You'd think a title like that would earn respect. Fear, even. But around the campfires, among the broken warriors who still dared to dream of a free Mars, it did something stranger. It created distance. I could see it in their eyes. They looked at me like I was drifting, half man, half myth. Not someone you shared a drink with. Not someone you confided in. Just a shadow that moved through battlefields and came back with blood on his boots and silence in his mouth. Rika tried to talk to me one night. We were tending to wounded, patching up a new recruit who'd taken a shard to the leg. She said, "They need you to be real, Elias, not just the legend." I didn't know how to answer, because by then, I didn't feel real anymore. I didn't feel much of anything. The raids came faster after that. We couldn't afford to sit still. The Vrashin had adjusted their tactics. Less precision, more brutality. Cities that still had humans in them were being glassed from orbit. Supply lines were hit with scatter bombs. Civilians were hunted as bait. It wasn't war anymore. It was erasure. So we gave up on being defensive. We decided to strike first, every chance we got. Inferna helped us find a weapons cache buried under the bones of an old terraforming rig. Forgotten tech. Prototypes from the early colonization years. Half the stuff didn't work. The other half, let's just say it was never meant for humans to touch. But we touched it anyway. We modified arc lances meant for drilling bedrock into portable melee weapons. We strapped fusion cells to drone chassis and turned them into walking bombs. One of the engineers built a magnetic pulse hammer that could crack Vrashin armor like a can of soup. And I found something buried under the reactor bay, a suit. Old military prototype, designed for EVA repairs in high radiation zones. Reinforced frame, exoskeletal boosters, still functioning. I wore it into the next battle. The mission was simple. Infiltrate a Vrashin forward lab, steal whatever tech we could, blow the rest to hell. Except nothing on Mars is ever simple. We went in with a team of 12. Only 7 came back, but we got what we came for. Data cores, biological samples, and something far worse. Files. Experiments. They've been testing on survivors, using human brains to augment their own processors, tearing memories out like code and stitching them into combat programs. One of the files had Lena's name on it, her ID, her face. I stared at it for a long time. Malu tried to pull me away, but I just kept looking. Like maybe, if I stared hard enough, I could reach through the screen and pull her back. Reverse time. Undo everything. But time doesn't care about your pain, and the dead don't get rewrites. So I copied the files, burned the rest, and left with a fire in my chest so fierce, I swear it could have powered the entire mountain. That night, I stood outside our hideout with Dom. The stars were blinking like they didn't know what came next. "You okay?" he asked. I didn't answer. He looked down, nodded. "You don't have to be, you know." "Okay," I said. "They used her." "Yeah," he said softly. "They use everything." And then he handed me a flask. Not alcohol, just water. But the gesture mattered. "You're not a butcher, Elias," he said. "You're a storm." A few days later, Inferna intercepted another signal. Vrashin distress beacon. Sounded like one of their commanders had gone dark near the ruins of Olympia Grid. We debated what to do. Rika said it was bait. Malu said it was an opportunity. Inferna said, Let me speak. We passed her into a Vrashian frequency. What she said chilled every human in the room. You taught us pain. We learned. You taught us silence. We listened. Now listen to us. Every drop you spilled is coming back in fire. And the butcher walks with us. They responded with a targeting strike on our old camp. We weren't there, but we felt the message. They were afraid, and fear makes predators sloppy. The next raid was bloodier than anything we'd ever tried. Deep behind enemy lines, a cloning facility disguised as a mining rig. This was where they were building more of themselves. Faster, smarter. The next wave, we couldn't let it stand. We went in with fire and fury. I led the charge again, suit powered, blade hot, every nerve wired to a single thought. You don't get to erase us. We lost half the squad, but we burned the place down. And as we stood in the collapsing tunnel, Vrashian bodies around us, Dom coughing up blood beside me, Rika holding her arm like it was about to fall off. I heard it again. The name, whispered, echoed, the butcher. But this time, it didn't feel like a curse. It felt earned. It felt like a warning. Because if this was what it took to keep the human fire burning, then so be it. Let them call me the butcher. Let them fear the man with no name left to lose. There are wounds you can patch with med foam and grit. Then there are the others, the ones that never show up on a scan. The kind that bleed in silence, long after the fight's over. After we burned the cloning facility, we didn't celebrate. There was no cheering, no toasts, no rally cries. Just quiet, heavy, like the ashes of that place had followed us back, clinging to our lungs, our skin, our thoughts. We'd won, but no one felt like a victor. Dom coughed up black for 3 days. Malu refused to leave the lab. Rika wouldn't speak unless she had to. And me? I stopped sleeping, not out of fear, not even out of guilt. I just didn't see the point anymore. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lena. Not the real Lena. Not the one who used to laugh with her whole face or trace star charts on the ceiling with her fingers. I saw the ghost. The fragment the Vrashian had pulled from her, digitized, sterilized, stripped of everything that made her hers. They didn't kill her. They archived her. And somehow, that felt worse. We were located to an underground cargo silo, buried deep in the Martian crust beneath a dead geothermal plant. Infernus said it was secure, off-grid, cold, forgotten, perfect for ghosts. The silence in that place was different. It wasn't tactical. It was emotional, like the whole cavern was holding its breath, like it was waiting for us to shatter. And we did, quietly, one by one. Rika started limping again. No injury, just phantom pain. The kind that came from the soul, not the bone. Dom stopped telling jokes. Even Infernus' voice got quieter, slower, like she was learning to mourn with us. I kept busy. Maintenance, patrols, inventory, anything to avoid sitting still, anything to keep my thoughts from turning inward. Because if I paused too long, I started to feel it, that thing inside me, that growing emptiness, like I was watching myself from a distance, like I wasn't a man anymore, just a suit of scars marching toward whatever came next. One night, I found myself in the comms chamber alone, staring at an old photograph. Me and Lena, before the invasion. Her smile was real, mine not so much. I looked younger, softer, human. I don't remember when I stopped looking like that. Inferno flickered to life beside me, voice low. You miss her. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. She continued. I've run simulations, reconstructed memory threads from her voice patterns. If you want, I can now. No, I said, sharper than I meant to. Silence. Understood, she replied, and faded back into the walls. But the damage was done. The memory was awake again, and it wasn't going back to sleep. A week later, we received a distress signal. Faint, fractured, human encryption. It repeated the same 3 words over and over. Help, civilian, children. We didn't know where it came from, somewhere beyond the ash line, deep in the gray zone, where no one had gone in months. Too exposed, too deadly. Nothing but dust and old bones. Dom wanted to ignore it. Rika said it was bait. Inferno was undecided. Statistically, she said, chances of survival are 2.3%. But I couldn't ignore it, because those 3 words weren't just data. They were human. So I said the one thing I hadn't said in days. We're going. Rika cursed under her breath. Dom stared like I'd grown a second head. But no one argued. Because when you wear the name Butcher, people stop asking why. We left before sunrise. Just me, Rika, and a small recon team. No drones, no air support, just a stolen crawler rig and blind hope. The gray zone lived up to its name. Dust storms like curtains, static in the air that made your teeth hum. No landmarks, no sound but the crunch of wheels over glass soil. 3 hours in, We picked up movement. Faint, fleeing, human. We followed it. And what we found, God, it was a school transport, half buried in ash, hull buckled from an old orbital strike. The distress signal came from inside. A girl, maybe 10 years old, hiding beneath a pile of insulation panels. She was dehydrated, shaking, but she was alive. And around her 6 more kids, younger, unmoving. We checked pulses. 1, maybe 2 still breathing. Rika covered her mouth and walked away. I just stood there, numb, staring at what was left of innocence. No Vrashin nearby, no soldiers, just time, just slow death. We got them back to the crawler, fed them, warmed them, did what we could, but I kept seeing that little girl's eyes. Empty, not from trauma, from acceptance, like she knew we were too late, like she expected it. We buried the others that night. No ceremony, just names scratched into a tablet and a few words whispered into the wind. Rika sat beside the crawler for hours afterward, staring at nothing. I thought I was numb, she said finally. I thought, after everything, I couldn't feel this anymore. I didn't reply, because I knew exactly what she meant. Back at base, the survivors were quiet, withdrawn. The girl, her name was Nia, refused to speak. She just stared at me, all the time, like I was something she couldn't quite decide was real or worth fearing. That night, I walked past her quarters and heard her crying, soft, like she was trying not to exist. And I realized something. We were fighting so hard to save humanity. We were forgetting how to be human. So I sat down beside her and said the only thing that mattered. I'm sorry. She looked up, eyes wide, tears frozen on her cheeks. For what? She whispered. For not getting there sooner. And in that moment, she reached out, took my hand, didn't say another word, just held on, like I was the last tether she had to a world that used to make sense. And I didn't pull away, because for once, I wanted to feel it. The weight, the grief, the humanity I'd buried. To bleed again, not on the outside, but inside, where it counts. The next morning, Inferna informed us the Vrashin had moved their fleet, shifted patrol routes, left a blind spot in the upper orbit. An opportunity, she said. Malu said it was suicide. Rika said, we're not ready. But I looked at Nia, at her fragile, haunted expression, and I said, we don't wait anymore, because we'd spent too long reacting, too long bleeding in silence. It was time to make noise. You never forget the first time you lose the sky. The moment you look up and realize it's no longer yours, no longer home, no longer promise, no longer infinite, just a ceiling, a cage. I remember that moment like a second scar on my heart. The day the Vrashin came, the Martian sky turned black, not with clouds, but with machines. It looked like someone had taken a blade and sliced heaven open, letting the cold pour in. We stopped dreaming upward after that. We stopped wondering what lay beyond, because we already knew them. After the rescue in the gray zone, the air changed in our bunker. You could feel it in the way people walked, the way they spoke. Less fire, more weight. We'd saved lives, sure, but we'd also felt the edge of something colder, deeper, the kind of hopelessness that doesn't scream, it just settles. That's when Inferna delivered the data. A gap, not big, not clean, but real. The Vrashin fleet had repositioned, probably a response to our last strike. They'd moved orbital supply routes, which meant, for the first time in months, a hole in their surveillance net. 5 hours. That's all we had. 5 hours where a team could get to the upper atmosphere, launch a payload, and cripple their comm relays. It was insane. We didn't have proper launch equipment, no working shuttles, barely enough propulsion tech to get a crate off the ground, let alone a team. But we had grit, and a dream that maybe, we could take back a piece of the sky. We found the old atmospheric lifter buried outside Meridian Outpost. Cracked hull, 2 broken turbines. Looked like it hadn't flown since the first terraforming cycle. Malu and the engineers worked around the clock, welding, wiring, rerouting oxygen lines just to keep the core from cooking us alive. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't safe, but it flew, sort of. We named it Ash Wing, because if we were going to fall, we'd fall like embers. The mission was clear. Launch Ash Wing, break the upper crust, deploy Inferna's spike. The spike wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a virus, a signal overload that would fry their comm relays for just long enough to knock out local command coordination. That meant no more orbital scans, no precision strikes, no way for the Vrashin to track movement across 3 major regions. We wouldn't win the war, but we'd breathe again. We'd move. We'd reclaim time. And sometimes, time is the most dangerous weapon you can give the desperate. The morning of the launch, I walked the length of the silo alone, ran my hand along the curve of Ashwing's hull. It shuddered under my fingers like it knew what was coming. Rika found me there, tightening her gear. You don't have to go, she said. I just stared at the ship. You've done enough, she added, softer this time. You've already given them everything. I turned to her. Not everything. She nodded once, like she expected that answer, like she'd always known how this story would go. We suited up in silence. Dom joined us last, his shoulders still taped from the last mission. Malu would stay behind, guiding the spike remotely. Inferna's consciousness was already embedded in the core, linked directly to the payload. This wasn't just a mission, it was a message. The sky was no longer theirs. Takeoff was chaos. Turbulence hit us the second the boosters ignited. Ashwing bucked and screamed like a dying animal. Dom was barking status checks. Rika was locked into the targeting array, and I closed my eyes. Not because I was scared, but because, for just 1 second, I let myself imagine Lena sitting beside me, hand in mine, smile on her face. Hold on, I whispered. Maybe to her, maybe to myself. We broke atmosphere with a cough and a prayer. The sky went from red to black in a blink. Mars shrank beneath us, still burning, still broken, but still there. I don't know what I expected. Some great revelation? A divine answer? What I got was silence. And stars. So many stars. For the first time since the war began, I remembered what the sky used to feel like. Hope, freedom, home. But the moment passed. The warning lights screamed. The Vrashin had seen us. 3 pursuit drones cut across our path, sleek, silver, fast, too fast. Inferna rerouted systems, locked the spike into the launch bay, and activated the countdown. Rika took the guns. Dom rerouted the boosters for one last jolt. Me? I grabbed the manual release. Because if the system failed, someone had to do it old school. Of course it failed. The first drone clipped our stabilizer. We spun hard. Alarms went red. Rika took down one of them with a lucky burst. Dom held us steady with nothing but muscle and instinct. But the spike jammed, and Inferna's voice crackled through static. Manual override required. I didn't hesitate. I climbed into the bay, strapped into the harness, and yanked the release lever. Nothing. Second try, still nothing. Third try, I screamed. Pulled like my life depended on it. Because it did. And then, thunk, the bay opened. The spike launched. A beam of light surged toward the stars, quiet and beautiful. Then everything went white. I woke to Rika shaking me. My suit was torn. Pressure warning blinking red. Dom's voice in my earpiece, panicked, yelling something I couldn't hear. But I saw Mars below us. And something else. Across the surface, Vrashin towers blinked, and then went dark. The signal had landed. Inferna had delivered. We'd done it. But we weren't going home. The damage was too much. One engine offline. Life support dropping fast. Rika looked at me, eyes full of fire and tears. What now? I stared at the flickering controls, then at the stars, then at Mars. We aimed for the fire, I said. We crash-landed near Dust Ridge. Broke the crawler sled on impact. Rika's leg was fractured. Dom had a gash down his face. Me? I was smiling, because I could hear the silence. The sweet, beautiful silence of them not knowing where we were. Of us taking back one damn breath of freedom. And that sky? The one we thought we'd lost. It was still ours. Maybe not all of it, but enough. Enough to remind us that no matter how dark it gets, no matter how deep the void stretches, we were here first. And we don't give up what's ours. Not without fire. Not without a fight. They say once you cut the head off a snake, it dies. But no one ever tells you what happens when the body keeps thrashing. After the comm spike hit, Mars changed. Not immediately. The sky didn't explode. The Vrashin didn't vanish. But something shifted, just beneath the surface, like tension snapping on a fault line. Their precision was gone. No more coordinated patrols. No surgical strikes. Just static, silence, and confused movement. And that, for us, was oxygen. We hadn't had real breathing room in months. The sky we'd once feared was now blind. And that meant we could move. We regrouped in the cradle basin, just below the ruins of New Tarsus. Rika's leg was still wrapped tight in sin cloth, but she wouldn't sit still. Dom had a fresh line of stitches across his temple and a scowl that hadn't left in days. Me? I was running on fumes and adrenaline, and honestly, I liked it that way. The spike had worked. Inferna confirmed the blackout reached across 3 sectors. The Vrashin were scrambling, and that meant only one thing. They'd send someone to fix it. A commander, a leader, the crown. And if we could break them, really break them, it wouldn't just buy time. It might end this. We got the location from Inferna. A subterranean relay node, deep beneath the Ares Ridge, part command center, part fortress, built into Martian bedrock. The signal chatter was light, scattered. Whatever leader they'd sent was operating in the dark, trying to re-establish order. This was our shot. One kill, one message. Take their crown and watch their empire shake. The strike team was small, just 6 of us. Rika, Dome, 2 silent twins from the dust front who never gave names. A medic named Soren who had no combat experience but insisted on coming anyway. And me, the butcher. We moved at night, buried ourselves in the sand during daylight hours, letting storms pass over us like ghosts. It took us 3 days to reach the ridge, and on the 4th, we found the door. Not metal, not even stone, just a shimmer in the rock, Russian cloaking tech. Malu had shown us how to spot it. Look for where the dust doesn't settle. Look for silence that feels too perfect. We breached it with a shaped charge, dropped 2 guards in the corridor, and slipped into their lair. The place was a maze, twisting tunnels, flickering light, Russian architecture that made you feel like you were walking through the inside of a living machine. We stuck close, tight, every sound amplified by the stone. Soren was shaking. The twins were ghost silent. Dom was whispering updates into his wrist mic. And Rika? She walked like a woman already writing her last chapter. I wanted to stop her, say something, anything. But in war, words come late. Always. We reached the command chamber by sheer luck, or fate. I don't know anymore. It opened like a cathedral carved from obsidian, humming with low-frequency pulses. And at the center, standing tall in a fluid-like suit of glowing armor, was him, the Vrashian commander, crown still intact, radiating heat and hatred like a star ready to go supernova. He didn't speak, not in words. Anyway, he looked at me, and somehow knew. You are the human they call Butcher, his voice said inside my head. Not spoken, thought, cold, clinical. I didn't flinch. I'm the one who's going to end you, I said. The fight wasn't fair. It never is. He moved like lightning wrapped in flesh, twisting, floating, striking with a blade that sang through the air like sorrow made solid. Dom went down first, crushed against a pillar. One of the twins vanished into fire. Soren screamed and dropped behind me, trying to drag Rika to cover. I charged him, not because I thought I could win, but because someone had to try. The blade cut through my suit like it was paper. My left side lit up in pain, white hot, sharp, but I kept swinging, wrench in one hand, combat knife in the other. Every hit I landed felt like punching through thunder. And then I saw it, a crack, just beneath his shoulder plate, glimmering, small, but real. I grabbed a thermal charge off my belt, jammed it into the opening, and shoved him back with everything I had left. He staggered, and then exploded in blue fire. The room went silent. Not the kind of silence you hear, the kind you feel. Soren was coughing blood. Rika was on one knee, her rifle melted. One of the twins was dragging the other out, and I just stood there, covered in ash, looking at the charred remains of the Russian commander. No crown, just bone, just another corpse. We didn't say anything on the way out. There was nothing to say. The sky outside was still black, still distant, but it felt lighter, like maybe, just maybe, it belonged to us again. Later that night, back at camp, Inferna confirmed the relay went dark. No more Russian chatter in that sector. No orders, no leader, just silence. And for once, it was ours. I found Rika by the old fire pit. She was sitting still, her leg propped up, staring at the stars like they owed her something. You ever wonder, she said, what peace would even look like? I sat beside her. No more orders, no more missions, no more Butcher, I said. She looked at me. Would you even know who you were without this war? I didn't answer, because I didn't know, because I wasn't sure I wanted to know. We'd broken their crown, but the war wasn't over. Not yet. The body still thrashed, but now it was bleeding, and we were still holding the blade. They say war is fire, but they forget to mention what burns. Sometimes it's the cities, the forests, the steel, but most of the time, it's you, the person you used to be, the voice you had before the screaming, the skin that remembered sunlight, laughter, a time when you were whole. By the time we reached the outskirts of Sirion Crater, I could feel the fire under mine. Not the kind that scorches your skin, the kind that chews your insides from the ribs out. Rage, grief, whatever was left of hope. We had broken their crown, cut the line between their orders and their soldiers. But now they weren't fighting a war. They were out for revenge. It started with the cities, not the big ones, the small ones. The kind that barely showed up on old maps. Populations in the dozens. Farmers, scrappers, children. The Vrashian hit them like lightning. No warnings, no demands, just light and ash. It wasn't conquest. It was punishment, a message. You touched our king. Now watch everything you love burn. We knew we had to move, but we didn't just want to defend. We wanted to strike. Because if they were going to burn our people alive for breathing, then we'd make them bleed for it. That's when Inferno brought us the name. Unit Theta 19. One of the last elite Russian hunter teams still functional, autonomous, brutal, and recently deployed to wipe the crater clean. She found their location, buried in seismic readings, heat signatures, patterns that no human eye could track. They were traveling fast. 8 legs, armored hulls, biomech enhancements, killing everything in their path. We didn't wait. We loaded up the crawler, armed ourselves with everything that could explode, burn, or cut, and we drove into the storm. Rika was still limping, but she didn't complain. Dom didn't speak. He just loaded shell after shell into his launcher. Malu patched the comms to track the Russian movements in real time. And me? I sat in silence, staring out at the red sand as it blew past, thinking about every face that was already ash. We caught up to them outside a settlement called Ember's Reach. Ironic, there was no reach left, just ruins and smoke. The Russian had already torn through the outer farms. The main cluster of homes was next, and the civilians were cornered, hiding in the remnants of an old hydro tower. We had minutes, that's it, so we dropped in hard. No stealth, no plans, just fury. The first of them came over the ridge, 8 feet tall, blade arms dripping, bodies humming with power. They moved like insects, but with precision. No wasted motion, no hesitation. I hit the first one with an EMP spike to the chest and followed up with 2 shots to the core. It stumbled, twitched, and fell. Dom caught the second with a thermal grenade. Rika sliced through the third's leg with a scorched alloy blade and finished it with a blast to the face. But they just kept coming. 6, 8, 12. Inferno's voice in my ear. If they reach the tower, everyone dies. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I was already moving, running, bleeding, screaming orders between gunshots. It wasn't a battle. It was a collapse. Like the whole world was folding in on itself, and we were the ones trying to hold it open with our bare hands. I remember the sound most. Not the gunfire, not the metal screams. The children, crying from inside the tower. That's what lit the final match in me. I rushed the lead Russian, a brute with reinforced plating and what looked like human bones laced into its frame. It turned to meet me, blade spinning. I didn't stop, didn't blink, didn't care. I leapt, brought the arc wrench down on its face. Sparks, blood, fire. We both hit the ground. I rolled, came up, stabbed my blade into its joint. One arm gone. Its other blade slashed across my chest, ripped the armor open, flesh beneath it. I tasted blood, but I didn't go down. Because I couldn't. Because there were still people behind me who believed I could win. So I did the only thing left. I ripped out its core with my hands. When the last Russian fell, the sky turned quiet again. Not peaceful, just still. Like even the planet was catching its breath. Dom was limping. Rika had a gash across her cheek. One of the twins gone. Malu was sobbing into the comms, trying to stabilize what was left of the crawler. And me? I dropped to my knees beside the hydro tower and looked into the eyes of a little boy no older than Nia. He had dirt on his face, a bruise on his arm, and a fist clenched around a toy, something he'd held on to even while the world fell apart. He looked at me like I was a story come to life. And in that moment, I remembered this was why we bled. Not for territory, not for vengeance. For them. We got the civilians out, brought them back to the crater, set up tents, shared rations, buried the ones we were too late to save. That night, Rika sat beside me on a sand dune, wrapping her arm. "You okay?" she asked. I laughed. A dry, broken sound. Not even close. She smiled, but her eyes didn't. "We're running out of pieces to break." I didn't answer, because I felt it too. The weight. The slow, cracking fatigue in your soul when even the victories feel like funerals. Inferno patched through a new signal the next day. Not Russian. Ours. A call from a resistance group out of Phobos base. Survivors. Engineers. A few stolen ships. They'd been waiting for a sign that someone was still fighting. We were that sign. I closed my eyes and let that sink in. We weren't alone. Not anymore. But the fire? It was still here. Still burning. And in its heat, I made a promise. The next time they came for us, they wouldn't find civilians. They'd find a storm. They say every war has its end, but no one ever tells you how it feels when that end comes. Not like a victory parade, not like fireworks, more like a breath held too long, a silence that settles heavy and cold. That's what it was like for us. standing on the edge of everything, knowing the last fire was burning low, but still burning. The days leading up to the final push were a blur. We weren't soldiers anymore. Not really. We were ghosts stitched from pain and hope. A ragtag army made from broken pieces, fighting a war that had taken everything but our will. Nia was with us now. That little girl who never spoke, who held my hand like it was the only anchor left. She was quiet, but her eyes burned with something fierce, something that reminded me why we fought. Because no matter how dark the night, there's always a spark waiting to catch. Inferna had hacked into the Vrashian fleet's core network, found a weakness, a blind spot, a chance. If we struck there, we could end the war. We didn't have ships. We didn't have artillery. We had grit and fire, the last fire. The plan was simple. We'd infiltrate the core fleet's main vessel, the Dominion, take it from the inside, crash their command, shatter their hold on Mars. Rika led the infiltration team. Dom covered our backs. Malu coordinated from the ground. And I was the blade, the butcher, the storm. The journey to the Dominion was silent, too silent, like the calm before a scream. The ship was a fortress, cold steel wrapped in alien technology, humming with a pulse that threatened to tear us apart. We slipped through airlocks and shadowed corridors. Every step felt like walking through the ribs of a dying beast. Inside, we fought like everything depended on it. Because it did. The Vrashian were relentless, swift, merciless. Blades met flesh. Bullets met metal. Screams met silence. And through it all, I kept thinking about Lena, about her smile, about what we were fighting to bring back. We reached the command deck. Rika disabled the defenses. Dom set charges. Malu jammed communications. I stood by the control console, heart pounding, hands shaking. Inferna's voice crackled through the comms. Elias, you know what to do. I nodded, though she couldn't see. I initiated the override. The ship shuddered. Fire bloomed in the engines. The last fire. We ran. Explosions chased us. The corridors fell apart. Time stretched and shattered. Nia's hand was in mine, her grip strong, her eyes fierce. Outside, the sky cracked open. Fire met fire. The stars watched in silence. We were free, not because we won, but because we dared to fight. We fell hard, lost friends, lost parts of ourselves, but we kept moving, kept breathing, kept fighting. The last fire was never about the end. It was about the fight, the hope, the spark that refuses to die. And as I look back now, through the smoke, the pain, the loss, I see it, that fire, burning, bright,